TorqueKing 4x4 presents NV4500 main shaft assembly.
Over the years, there's been a number of different shafts made for the NV4500 transmission. Here we have an original equipment GM two-wheel drive shaft, an early style aftermarket full spline shaft for Dodge Diesel 4x4, the TorqueKing Dodge Diesel 4x4 shaft, and what's a current production 4x2 full spline shaft. This type of shaft uses a split thrust washer that goes behind the gear, between the gear and the nut set. A major difference in the design of these shafts is these three shafts, the original equipment, the early full spline, and the TorqueKing shaft, were all made that the 3/4 synchro, the rear output bearing, and the fifth gear were interference or press fit. The difference between these current production full spline shafts is those three things are all slip fit. As you can see, this 3/4 synchro just slips on. Same with the rear output bearing, that would just slip on, and the fifth gear would just slip into place on this shaft. Due to the difference in these shaft designs, the video where we show the press fit for these types of shafts does not apply the press operations for these aftermarket shafts that are currently in production.
For assembly tools, QT 2008 1-2 synchro support and QT 2007 heavy-duty lock ring pliers are used for all shafts. QT 2004 bearing and synchro installer, along with the 4x4 QT 1074 rear bearing installer, are only used on genuine new venture, TorqueKing silver or gold, and early aftermarket full spline shafts.
Place the first-second synchro hub on the QT 2008 block. Align the match marks and slide the synchro sleeve onto the hub. Apply a generous amount of petroleum jelly to each of the 4 synchro spring holes. Place the small synchro springs and struts on the hub as shown. The petroleum jelly will help hold them in place during assembly. Depress the 4 struts and carefully slide the sleeve over them. This tricky operation can be performed by one person, but is easier done by 2 people. Be sure not to pop the springs out of their holes. Carefully check to make sure the struts are properly aligned and the springs are centered in their holes. The 3rd, 4th, reverse, and 5th gear synchronizer units have similar assembly procedures. Insert a large synchro spring into the spring recess. Depress the spring with a small screwdriver and slide the strut into place. The spring should be centered in the holes and the strut should easily depress. Align the match marks and carefully slide the synchro sleeve onto the synchro hub. Install one of the 4 large snap rings in the 2nd groove from the front of the main shaft, 1st and 2nd synchro support splines. Turn the main shaft over and slide the 1st and 2nd synchronizer assembly onto the main shaft splines. Be sure that the tapered side is towards the front or 2nd gear. Install a snap ring into the groove next to the synchro hub. Place the large inner steel synchro ring next to the synchro hub. Make sure the tabs line up with the slots. Lubricate the center synchro ring in Castrol Syntorque LT. Install that and install the outer synchro cone. Install the large snap ring in the groove. Lubricate the first gear bearing in Castrol Syntorque and install it on the shaft. Install the first gear. Make sure the tabs on the center synchro ring line up with the slots in first gear. The gear should rotate freely in the synchronizer assembly. Slide the reverse gear synchro clutch onto the mainshaft splines and against first gear. Use the optional QT 2007 heavy-duty lock ring pliers or other suitable tool to expand the lock ring over the mainshaft. Tap the lock ring until firmly seated in the groove. Lubricate the Teflon reverse gear bearing spacer with Castrol Syntorque LT and slide it over the shaft. Lubricate the reverse gear bearing and reverse gear synchro ring in Castrol Syntorque LT and also slide them into place. Install the reverse gear assembly onto the main shaft. Be sure that the slots in the gear line up with the tabs on the synchro ring. The gear should be roughly flush with the shoulder at the back of the main shaft. Install the reverse gear thrust washer against the reverse gear. Install the reverse gear bearing onto the shaft. Use the QT 2003 main shaft rear bearing installer and a hydraulic press to seat the main shaft rear bearing firmly against the main shaft thrust washer. Install the main shaft input side up in a holding fixture. Install the second gear synchronizer inner cone, lubricated center synchronizer ring, and outer synchronizer cone onto the main shaft. Install the lock ring into the groove. Lubricate the second gear bearing in Castrol Syntorque. Install the bearing on the shaft. Install the second gear onto the shaft, making sure that the tabs on the synchro ring line up with the slots in the gear. Grasp one of the small 1/8" diameter pins with a needle nose pliers. Insert the pin into the hole on the main shaft, just above the second gear. Install the thrust washer over the pin. Expand the third gear snap ring over the shaft and install it into the groove next to the thrust washer. Lubricate the third gear Teflon bearing spacer and Castrol Syntorque and slide it over the shaft and against the snap ring. Lubricate the third gear bearing and Syntorque and place it on the shaft. Slide the third gear over the bearing. Lubricate the synchro ring and place it on the third gear. Rest the third-fourth synchronizer with the groove on the third-fourth hub facing outward onto the splines of the main shaft. Index the main shaft and synchro hub splines. Use the QT 2004 installer and a hydraulic press to press the synchro hub onto the main shaft. Be careful not to pinch your fingers between the synchro ring and gear as you press the synchronizer assembly on the shaft. The third gear should rotate freely after the synchro is pressed on.
See the TorqueKing.com interactive NV4500 transmission exploded views for application-specific part sequences, product information, tools, manuals, and more. Click on the blue link here in the index to go to the page that you need for main shafts. We'll go see that we have a complete exploded view that shows all the parts that go on the main shaft. All the blue numbers are hot links that will take you to an appropriate page or product selector where you can get the pricing, order, and all the product information you need to make your purchase decision. To return to the exploded view, just click on the X and that will take you right back to the exploded view page you were on. Our TM1003 color illustrated step-by-step NV4500 shop manual is the comprehensive companion to the service video you just watched. Made with plastic covers and a fold-flat design, you can have the TM1003 manual right on the bench with you throughout your transmission rebuild process. Detailed coverage includes disassembly, inspection, exploded views, parts lists, assembly, shift cover service, transmission specifications and frequently asked questions, tech articles, torque specs, and special tools.